The Danish Gambit begins with the move pawn to e4. Most opponents respond with pawn to e5, after which you play pawn to d4. When black captures on d4, you play pawn to c3, offering another pawn. If black takes again, you develop your bishop to c4. If black captures the pawn on b2, you develop your other bishop to b2. This is a dangerous and aggressive opening where you sacrifice a couple of pawns in exchange for rapid development. By placing your bishops on active squares, you gain strong attacking potential and can launch a quick offensive. However, black can respond with natural moves like bishop to b4, delivering a check to your king. This is followed by knight to f6 and then castling, ensuring their king's safety. These moves can make it challenging for you to execute a fast attack. Black often develops too quickly and hides their king safely, but I've discovered a way to use the same attacking ideas while making it harder for your opponent to escape. There's a small but effective trick that changes everything. Instead of immediately entering the gambit, you first play knight to f3, giving the impression of classical play and attacking black's c5 pawn. Most opponents respond with knight to c6 to defend the pawn. Now, you transition into a gambit-like setup by playing pawn to d4. When black captures on d4, instead of recapturing, you play pawn to c3. If black accepts the pawn, you develop your bishop to c4. The idea remains the same. Finish your development quickly and launch a rapid attack against your opponent's undeveloped pieces and centralized king. Most players will capture the pawn on b2, after which you respond with bishop takes b2. In this position, black's natural move, pawn to d5, becomes less appealing. If they play it, you can capture with your pawn and attack their knight, creating strong pressure. Black might aim for another defensive setup, one that many opponents frequently choose, bishop to b4, delivering a check to your king. In response, you play knight to c3. Then black continues with knight to f6, preparing to castle. You allow this by castling yourself, and black castles as well, feeling secure with their king. At this point, black plans to play pawn to d6, develop their light-squared bishop, and use their 2 extra pieces to win the game. But here comes your key move, knight to d5. This move creates significant pressure on black's position. Your knight attacks black's knight on f6, supported by your dark-squared bishop on b2, threatening to capture and disrupt black's pawn shield in front of their king. Additionally, your knight puts pressure on black's bishop on b4, forcing them into a difficult defensive position. If black captures your knight on d5, you recapture with your pawn, gaining advantage by attacking their knight, which must retreat. This sequence leaves black in a worse position. Alternatively, black might try to alleviate the pressure by capturing the pawn on e4. If they do, that's your moment to strike. Play bishop to d3, relocating your bishop to a more active diagonal. From there, it attacks black's knight on e4 while also aiming toward their king, setting up a decisive attack. At this point, you're in a winning position. Black has played all the natural moves, but now they find themselves in a completely lost position. Your knight on d5 is creating overwhelming pressure, and whatever black tries, they are bound to suffer. If black retreats the knight to f6, you simply exchange knights. Black is forced to recapture with their pawn, leaving their king's position completely devastated. Another attempt might be knight to g5, where the knight is defended by black's queen, leading them to think it will result in a simple exchange of knights. However, this opens the door for a brilliant tactical sequence. Here's the stunning combination. Knight to f6, delivering a check to black's king while attacking their knight. Black has no choice but to capture the knight. You follow up with knight takes g5, maintaining pressure on the position. Black may capture the knight on g5, but now comes the finishing blow. Bishop takes f7. This sacrifices your bishop but leaves black's position completely shattered. Now queen to h5, delivering a beautiful victory. This sequence is not only highly effective but also a spectacular way to defeat opponents who used to have the upper hand against you. With this dangerous weapon in your arsenal, you can turn the tables and claim sweet revenge. Returning to the critical position of this opening variation, after you play knight to d5, black's move knight takes e4 is also a losing option. After you respond with bishop to d3, the pressure against black's king becomes insurmountable, making it impossible for them to defend. Another possible variation for black, knight takes d5. You respond by recapturing with the pawn, taking advantage of the knight on c6. Notice how your pawn controls all the forward squares, forcing the knight to retreat. Typically, black moves the knight to e7. At this point, you play queen to d4, creating a straightforward checkmate threat. Queen takes g7. Supported by your bishop, strangely enough, black has no effective way to defend against this. If black tries pawn to f6, you exploit a tactical idea with pawn to d6, delivering a discovered check to the king while attacking the knight. On the next move, you happily capture the knight and continue your overwhelming attack, leaving you in a winning position. Now let's consider another defensive attempt, knight to f5. In this case, you play queen to g4, maintaining your attack. Here, your queen threatens the knight on f5, and if it retreats, you still capture on g7, where your queen and bishop combine forces to attack. Black might respond with pawn to d6, hoping to develop their light-squared bishop and defend the knight. If they do, you simply play bishop to d3, creating a powerful double attack. This move not only targets black's knight on f5 but also opens a direct threat against the bishop on b4. In this position, black is completely defenseless. Unless they are well prepared for this opening, which is unlikely, it's nearly impossible for them to find a solution. Your attack is decisive, and the game is yours. At this point, black has far too many weaknesses to cover, and they simply cannot defend everything. They may attempt to secure their king, but in doing so, you can win a bishop for free. Additionally, the long diagonal remains incredibly weak for black. Not only do you gain an extra piece, but in all the following variations, you have powerful attacking opportunities. For example, you can threaten queen to c3, with plans to jump to h8, leaving black in a completely lost position. Now, there's one more scenario to consider. What if you offer the gambit with pawn to d4, followed by pawn to c3, and black captures? After bishop to c4, some of your opponents might avoid being overly greedy by capturing on b2. This reason, they may play a move like pawn to d6, aiming for safety and hoping to avoid the risks of rapid development. Here's a quick tip. The move queen to b3 is incredibly effective in this position. It attacks black's pawn on b7, putting immediate pressure on their setup. In most cases, black will respond with queen to e7, as there aren't many alternatives. However, after this move, black is surprisingly close to losing outright. You simply develop your knight to c3, and black's position becomes incredibly difficult. Their main problem is the inability to complete their development normally. For example, if black plays knight to f6, you simply castle. Black may try to develop their light-squared bishop, but they face numerous threats. Your knight can jump to strong squares. Your bishop remains active, creating pressure. Black's king is stuck, and their bishop cannot move freely because it must guard the pawn on b7. If black tries pawn to a5, which many opponents will play thinking it's a double attack on your queen and pawn, you respond with queen to a4. This turns the tables, creating a double attack of your own. Your queen on a4 now attacks both the knight on c6 and the king, forcing black to retreat the knight. From here, you have multiple winning options. For instance, play knight to d5, attacking the queen. If black captures your knight, respond with pawn takes d5, creating a pin against the knight on c6. The knight on c6 is now trapped and cannot move due to the pin. You can also play rook to e1 in the next move, exploiting another pin and winning black's queen. In either case, you're completely winning. Thanks for watching till end.